Hello, and welcome to the last Bitesize Stories for Bedtime with Ditto's Digital Adventures. Today's story is A Wish in the Fire, written and read by Aaron Baker. Sam sat on a log, a fire dying out in front of him. "Happy birthday, Sam. Make a wish," he said to himself quietly, as he made the same wish he'd made every year since he lost his parents when he was the mere age of 9. "I just want a friend. A best friend." Sam was 15 now. Without his parents for 7 years, he had to grow up quickly. As soon as he was orphaned, he was forced to work. First, he worked in factories, doing all the dangerous jobs the adults were too big for. Then he was a chimney sweep, a coal miner, and rat catcher, all before he was 14. His last job was in the shipyard. Sam was used to being treated poorly by adults, but the foreman of the shipyard was a particularly nasty piece of work. He liked to hit Sam across the back of the head, often without any provocation. On one fateful day, Sam fought back. He slid through the legs of the nasty foreman and pushed him off the pier. Knowing he had little time before he would be caught, he ran and hid in crates. After the excitement died down and everyone was put back to work, the crate Sam was in was lifted on a ship. That night, the gentle rock of the ship sent Sam into a deep sleep. It was unfortunate that Sam wasn't used to uninterrupted sleep, for he slept so deeply he didn't feel his crate be lifted off the ship, onto a cart pulled by horses and taken deep into France. He woke refreshed and relaxed, but only for a moment. Sam had ended up in a travelling circus. He watched a huge man with even bigger muscles holding a horse over his head. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He hoped the horse didn't mind. Sam was fascinated. He wandered around what must have been their backstage area. Just a field with tents, cages of animals, and the most interesting people doing such interesting things. He spoke with anyone who would listen to him, asking them, "What on earth is this place?" A man charming a cobra snake put down his pipe and covered the basket containing his terrifying but wonderful dancing reptile. "We are a circus. We perform all over the world. Right now, we are in Paris. Next week, who knows? New city every week. New country every 12 weeks. Sam was impressed. He had never seen anything like it before. It felt like a whole new world. When his parents were alive, they lived a modest but comfortable life. His dad owned the local shop, so they lived above it in a small flat. They never noticed what they didn't have, and they really didn't have much. They were just so very grateful to have each other that they never wanted for anything else. This circus felt like an alternate version of that life. Still not having much to yourself in ways of possessions, but what a full life. To travel the world with marvelous animals and performers. Sam ended up taking a job with them. He figured that traveling with animals was as good as a job as he would ever get. The only drawback was the circus ringleader, Monsieur Pierre. He was horrible to both animals and people alike. From behind a lopsided moustache, he mumbled, "Fine work for me. My current sweet boy broke his arm. He is just a mouth to feed now. Get in the cart with the cages." The Frenchman nudged Sam with a cane before turning around to a boy who could have only been 10 and saying, "Toby, you are like a horse who can't be ridden, but whose horse meat won't be tender, so I cannot work you and I cannot eat you. This field is your home now. Au revoir!" A whistle was sounded, and the convoy of carts began moving as one. "Don't follow, Toby, or I shoot," Pierre casually said as the boy Toby wept in the grass. Sam gulped. The circus wasn't so bad if you kept your head down and away from Monsieur Pierre. Sam learned that lesson quickly, but he did have a habit of speaking before he could stop himself. He did get punished. A lot. The best part about the circus was the animals. He loved animals, always had. When his parents were alive, they would feed the ducks together in the park. He loved how they pecked with their beaks and waddled away into the pond. Sam's short career as a rat catcher ended because they found him helping the rats escape instead of catching them like he was supposed to. Sam still didn't have a friend though. Not really. He was friendly with the performers and other crew members, but he was always working, so they rarely saw each other. The crew liked Sam for his rebellious nature. Like one time, Sam spread a rumour Pierre's moustache wasn't real, that it was just coal painted on his top lip. Pierre made him eat coal for punishment after that. The more rebellious Sam was, the less he was able to see the others. He was with the circus almost a year before he was sat before the fire alone on his birthday, wishing for a true friend. Sam blew out the last embers of the fire and went to sleep. There was something in the air the next morning when Sam woke. Not a smell or a gas, but an energy. Something was different. Sam could tell as he approached the food tent that there was news. Excited voices of crew and performers spilled out of the tent. The circus had gained a new attraction, Mr. Pips the chimpanzee. A few of the trainers had been working in secret with Pierre to get the chimp ready for his first show. Sam couldn't wait to see him. He'd never seen one before, but he had heard of them in his travels. He knew of a scientist from England that had studied them called Charles Darwin. He had discovered that chimps were our closest relative in the animal kingdom. Sam couldn't wait to see Mr. Pip's human-like hands. Sam peered through the back of the tent to see the show that night. The music crescendoed for the chimp's entrance. Nothing. Sam was confused and a bit disappointed. But then the chimp was pushed onto the stage by Pierre. Sam's jaw dropped. He was magnificent, but he wasn't doing anything on the stage. Sam could see Pierre's impatience building. This wasn't going to be pretty. Pierre's charming ringleader act quickly dissolved into aggression when the show wasn't going his way. A jolt of energy went through Sam as Pierre jabbed the chimp with his cane. He knew how much that hurt. Sam's hand came to his eyes. He had to cover the sight, too brutal to watch. He felt his jaw clench with anxiety. Laughing? Who could be laughing at this? Thought Sam. The sudden burst of laughter distracted Sam and he peered over his thumb. Mr. Pips had dodged the cane. Pierre came at him again and again, but Mr. Pips kept avoiding him. Sam started to laugh too. This was the greatest show of all time. By the time Pierre was pulling one end of his cane and Mr. Pips had the other, Sam had tears falling down his cheeks in hysterical laughter. Pips let go. Pierre fell right on his back. Sam thought his throat was going to leap out of his mouth. He was laughing so hard. Mr. Pips had style. He had moves. He even played up to the crowd's laughter. This chimp was just like Sam. Rebellious. A crew member saved Pierre by throwing the chimp backstage. The show was over, and Sam knew that the creature would be punished harshly for that performance. He rushed to find him so he could look after him. He couldn't let him suffer alone. When Sam got to the chimp's cage, the animal looked defeated. Sam knew that feeling all too well. Sam made a promise to that chimp. He promised him that they would be best friends, and Sam would help him get home. Sam didn't know it yet, but he had just become best friends with Darwin the chimp from London Zoo, the miraculous ape that escaped in the River Thames, the chimpanzee that Sam would have the most unexpected adventure with, and the animal that would make Sam's wishes come true. A friend. A best friend. The family you get to choose. For Sam, he was home. For Sam, home is where the heart is. And his heart was full again. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed our story, please like and subscribe to Ditto Theatre for more excellent digital adventures.